Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a very slow, very uncomfortable walk through a single day in the Middle Ages. A day you probably won't survive. Not because you'll be burned at the stake or accused of heresy or anything too dramatic. No, it's the little things that'll get you. The scratchy linens, the freezing chamber pot, the turnip-based everything. You'll see. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling sociable, drop a comment with your location and what time is where you are. I love seeing where everyone's listening from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up face first in a bed of rushes. Not metaphorical rushes, like a poetic expression. Literal ones. Dried plant stalks scattered across the wooden floor to soak up mess and provide the medieval version of home decor. They're also home to bugs, many-legged, extremely active bugs, and the occasional mouse. Your head aches slightly from the wine you drank last night, which wasn't really wine so much as vinegar's older, lazier cousin. There's no glass window to keep the draft out, just a wooden shutter barely latched. The air is cold, even though it's technically summer. You pull your coarse woolen blanket tighter. It smells faintly of livestock, which makes sense because it doubles as your traveling cloak. You don't technically own a second one. The room is shared. Your cousin snored all night from the pallet next to yours, and his breath smells like smoked fish and despair. There's no pillow, unless you count the sack of barley under your head, which you probably shouldn't. It's meant to be turned into porridge later. You roll over, carefully. The straw mattress pokes through the fabric, and there's a high chance you've developed a rash from something that nested in there overnight. You groggily wonder if it's fleas, lice, or some fourth cousin of both. Historians still argue whether these beds were ever cleaned properly or just replaced every few months with new straw and a prayer. You sit up. Your back protests. You're about 20 years old, which in medieval terms means your spine has already seen things. There's no toothbrush, of course, but you do have a small cloth pouch hanging by the door containing a mixture of crushed mint, charcoal, and maybe some burnt breadcrumbs. You chew that, spit it out into the hearth, and feel worse. Somehow worse. The charcoal has done nothing except add grit to your already toothache-prone mouth. Toothpaste won't be invented for several more centuries, and you wouldn't have been able to afford anyway. You splash your face with freezing water from a cracked wooden basin. There's no soap. The idea of full-body cleanliness is still reserved for monasteries or royalty. Most people are spot-cleaned at best. Ankles and armpits, if they're lucky. As you shuffle to your feet, you step in something wet. Is it from the dog that wandered in last night? Or the drip from the leaky ceiling? You choose not to investigate. You open the shutter. The street outside is beginning to stir. A merchant is shouting something incomprehensible. A chicken is absolutely losing its mind. You look down into the street and see a pig trotting confidently past, clearly late for something important. It's going to be a long day. In theory, you're lucky to have a roof over your head. Many don't. If you're in a village, you're probably in a timber-framed wattle and daub home with a thatched roof that occasionally bursts into flames from indoor cooking. If you're in a town, your home might be stacked like a lopsided cake, the upper stories leaning out over the street, threatening to kiss their neighbors in the wind. The toilet situation is, well, there isn't one. Not really. You got a chamber pot under the bed, and it's full. You carefully carry it to the back alley or the designated waste ditch and empty it while trying not to gag. You are not successful. Your day has begun. You put on your clothes, which are the same ones you slept in. No one has time for wardrobe changes. Your linen undershirt smells like onions and panic. Over it goes a woolen tunic, which somehow manages to be itchy and damp. The source of the damp is, as always, a mystery. Your feet slide into leather shoes. They're more like medieval Crocs, flat, unsupportive, and laughably porous. They've molded to your feet over the last few months, which sounds pleasant until you realize they've also molded in the other, more literal way. You try not to think about how long it's been since you bathed. Bathing is possible, technically. Public bathhouses were common in many towns across Europe for much of the Middle Ages, especially before the Black Death made everyone deeply suspicious of shared water. Still, it's not a daily thing, or even a weekly thing. Your last full soak was at Easter. You grab a chunk of yesterday's bread from the table. It's gone stale and requires actual effort to chew. Your jaw clicks ominously. No one in the house speaks as you eat. It's morning. Conversation is for people with energy and teeth. There's a dog curled by the fire. It opens one eye and considers barking, but decides against it. It has its own job, likely chasing rats and stealing unattended sausages. It's basically middle management. The fire is mostly embers now. You stir it to life using a stick that may or may not double as a toothbrush. There's no real breakfast cooking. If you're lucky, someone will boil a turnip later. For now, you nibble bread and stare into the fireplace like it's the only friend you've got. And honestly, it might be. You finish gnawing on your stale bread and brace yourself for the morning routine, such as it is. There's no shower, no scented body wash, no coffee machine blinking helpfully. What you have instead is an iron pot hanging over the hearth with a suspiciously beige paste bubbling inside. It's breakfast, sort of. Today, your household is serving up a classic, boiled turnips, mashed into something pretending to be porridge. There might be a sliver of onion in there, if you're lucky or someone dropped it by mistake. There's a dusting of herbs on top, but you can't tell if they're meant to be there or if they just blew in through the open shutter. You scoop some onto a wooden bowl. No spoons, just a flat piece of bread shaped vaguely like a scoop. It's meant to soak up the slop and function as both utensil and plate. This edible dishware is called a trencher, and yes, it sounds more romantic than it tastes. You chew carefully, try not to think too much about the slightly fermented undertone. You're 80% sure it's from the turnips. You're also 80% sure this same dish was served for dinner last night, and possibly lunch. The drink of choice is small beer. Not a little bit of beer, but an actual thing. Low alcohol ale that even children drink. Water is technically around, but it's risky, untreated, often contaminated, and associated with illness. So everyone starts the day with a buzz that barely counts as tipsy, but still leaves you wondering if the dog is staring at you on purpose. You may have heard that medieval people didn't care about hygiene. That's not exactly true. They did care. They just didn't have the same materials, schedules, or understanding of germs that we do now. Most households had a wash basin, some version of a towel, and something to scrape dirt off the skin. But soaps, especially good ones, were luxuries. Lye soap was common, basic, caustic, and deeply committed to ruining your skin. Washing your hands might leave them cleaner, but red and cracked, like you just fought a hedgehog. You rinse your hands in a bowl that someone else has already used, possibly multiple times, and dry them on a rag that has, without exaggeration, not been washed since Advent. Then comes dental care. You don't have a toothbrush. No one does. But you do have a finger and some ash. Or maybe mint leaves, if they're growing nearby. You rub whatever abrasive substance you have across your teeth, spit into the fireplace, and call it a win. Your breath now smells faintly of burnt wood and defeat. Medieval dental hygiene is more complicated than people get credit for. Some monastic medical texts recommend rinsing the mouth with wine, vinegar, or honeyed water. Others advise chewing herbs like parsley or fennel. But actual dental tools? Not really a thing yet. If you get a toothache, there are two options: a poultice made of mashed leeks and pig fat, or having the offending tooth yanked out by the village blacksmith. Those are not mutually exclusive. You might get both. You look around the house and realize that, as the youngest able-bodied person, it's your job to clean out the hearth, feed the chickens, and probably scrape something from the floor that's begun to smell. That something may or may not be alive. You're not thrilled to find out. You step outside, breathing in the cool morning air, which is pungent. Not in a refreshing pine breeze sort of way, but more damp wool, livestock, and a hint of manure. Still, it's better than the musty rushes inside. As you toss grain to the chickens, you consider how deeply unglamorous this life is. No knights, no dragons, no shining swords. Just frostbitten fingers and a chicken who seems to have a vendetta. This is the part of the day when you might get a little privacy. Behind the house, there's an outhouse, or if you live in a poorer village, a designated corner of the field. It's exactly as pleasant as it sounds. A hole, a wooden seat, and the faint knowledge that everything you deposit is either feeding the soil or flowing downstream to the next town. Toilet paper doesn't exist. Moss, straw, or the rough side of a bread crust is your best bet. Let that last one sink in. And yet, somehow, medieval folks kept going. They woke up, washed with freezing water, chewed on tree bark, and tackled the day head on. Mostly because they didn't have a choice. The idea of sleeping in is laughable when roosters crow at dawn and someone is already banging on the door asking if your chickens have laid anything worth stealing. Back inside, your father, or whoever rules the house, has begun the day's sermon. Not religious, just loud. He's ranting about the price of grain, the neighbor who let their sheep wander, and how the world's going to collapse if someone doesn't fix the thatch this week. You nod politely while mentally preparing to do exactly none of those things. The day's plans depend on your station. If you're a peasant, your time is dedicated to the land, tending fields, repairing tools, herding animals. If you're a servant in a wealthier household, it's sweeping, scouring, or standing still for 6 hours so the Lord's daughter can lean on you while she decides which veil to wear. But no matter where you fall on the social ladder, you're likely covered in some combination of dirt, flour, or chicken feathers by mid-morning. Your stomach rumbles. Already, historians still debate how many meals medieval people actually ate. Some sources suggest 2 a day, one in the late morning, one at sunset. Others say that laborers often grabbed extra snacks when they could. But in your case, if you want more food, you'll probably have to barter or find a job for someone wealthier than you who'll pay you in soup. And with that charming thought, you grab your tattered cloak, kiss the doorframe for luck, and step into the muddy path that calls itself a street. The mud squelches beneath your feet as you make your way into the village. It's not ordinary mud, though. It's a rich, fragrant cocktail of yesterday's rain, animal droppings, spilled ale, and the remnants of someone's failed attempt at a cabbage stew. The street isn't paved. The only cobbles around here are the ones you occasionally trip over, poking up like historical ankle traps. You pass neighbors, most of whom greet you with some variation of a grunt or a nod. No one has time for pleasantries. Everyone's busy surviving. One woman is sweeping her doorstep with a broom that's mostly stick and optimism. A child is trying to wrangle a goose that's decided today is not for wrangling. Somewhere in the distance, a bell clangs faintly. Not a church bell, but someone announcing that they've got fresh eels for sale. Eels were a big deal. In fact, in parts of medieval England, rents were sometimes paid in them. They were the chicken nugget of their day, affordable, protein-rich, and weirdly squirmy. You once saw someone eat one raw. You have not recovered. As you reach the edge of the square, the smells intensify. Smoke from the blacksmith's forge mixes with the sharp tang of tanning hides and the much less pleasant aroma of fermenting fish. Your eyes water. You pretend it's the smoke. If you're lucky, you got a job to go to. Maybe you're apprenticed to a tanner, a cooper, or a thatcher. These are real medieval professions, not just background flavor from a fantasy novel. They each come with their own hazards, burns, cuts, tetanus, but hey, it beats starving. If you're unlucky, like today, you're between jobs, which means looking for day labor. You sidle up to a group of men outside the alehouse, all waiting to see if someone wealthy enough to need help also feels generous enough to pay for it. A man in a stained tunic approaches, mumbling about needing someone to help move a cartload of firewood. You raise your hand too slowly. Someone else is chosen, and so begins your wandering. You loop past the baker, whose window is fogged with heat and flour. The smell of fresh bread is both magical and cruel. You haven't tasted soft bread in months. Most of yours is rye, coarse and dark, baked into dense wheels that could double as shields. White bread, that's for nobles. It's sifted repeatedly to remove all the nutritious parts, because what's luxury without unnecessary effort? Still, there's a chance you could get a broken loaf at the end of the day if you sweep the bakery's floors or carry in a barrel of water. You make a mental note to return before dusk. You drift toward the church. It's one of the few stone buildings in the village, its bell tower leaning slightly like it's been on one leg too long. Inside, there's quiet, coolness. Candles flicker against old walls. You sit in the back pew, partly for shade, partly because you've got nowhere else to go. It smells of wax, dust, and centuries of whispered confessions. You're not particularly religious, but in the Middle Ages, that's not really the point. Church is where things happen: festivals, meetings, gossip. It's where records are kept, where marriages are made official, and where punishments are announced. God is important, sure, but so is knowing if your neighbor's daughter ran off with the cooper's apprentice. As you rest, you notice the priest talking to a scribe, who's writing with careful strokes on parchment made from sheepskin, vellum. Paper exists, but still rare and imported, mostly from Islamic Spain or China. Too pricey for everyday scribbles. You watch them for a moment, wondering what it would be like to be literate. Only a small portion of the population can read or write, and even fewer in your class. Mostly clergy and nobility. For you, letters are mysterious squiggles that sometimes mean bad news. You leave the church as the sun reaches its peak, stomach rumbling again. You spot a peddler with a tray of wares: onions, dried apples, some questionable-looking cheese. You trade a wooden button and a favor you owe his cousin for half a handful of roasted peas. They crunch unpleasantly, but they're warm. Historians still argue whether the medieval diet was as terrible as we imagine. On feast days and in noble households, there was variety: roast meats, pies, spiced wines. But for the average villager like you, grains, pulses, more grains, sometimes a bit of fish or ale. Most meals were cooked in one pot, hence the name pottage. If you didn't have time or money for ingredients, you just added more water and hoped. As you eat, a commotion stirs by the well. Someone's fallen in again. It happens often enough that no one's shocked. Wells weren't always covered, and children, or adults who drank too much, were frequent casualties. The man is pulled out, sputtering. People laugh, then help him to his feet, slapping his back with a familiarity that suggests this is not his first splash. You make your way toward the edge of town where the washerwomen work. They're knee-deep in a stream, slapping clothes against rocks, gossiping loudly. Their hands are red from the cold, but their voices are lively. They're the unofficial news network of the village. If something happened, they know. And they're telling everyone who passes, whether they ask or not. Apparently, the Reeves pig escaped and wandered into the churchyard. Again. Also, the blacksmith's apprentice may have accidentally set fire to a cartload of hay, but claims it was divine intervention. No one believes him, especially the man who owned the hay. There's something comforting about this rhythm: the chaos, the repetition, the fact that every villager has a job, a story, and a daily battle with mud and questionable food. You take a long breath. The air still smells weird, but now it's weird in a familiar way. A slightly singed, mostly fermented, vaguely hopeful sort of way. And somewhere nearby, a rooster crows, for reasons known only to him. He may be broken that you're still picking roasted pea shells out of your teeth when a midday bell sounds, clangy, irregular, as if the bell ringer is either very tired or just hates his job. It's the village's reminder that the sun is at its highest, and, for those who can afford the luxury, it's time to rest. But you? Not so lucky. You turn toward the manor house. It rises on the far end of the village. Not exactly a castle, but close enough to make you feel very much like someone who doesn't belong near it. The walls are timber and wattle daub, but the beams are carved, and the windows are made from something other than just holes in the wall with fabric flaps. That's how you know the occupants are fancy. Also, they have an upstairs. That alone counts as architectural arrogance. You've managed to pick up a short-term gig here, helping with maintenance work on the grounds. Nothing glamorous: digging, hauling, maybe pretending to know how to fix a fence that is clearly losing its fight with gravity. You pass under the gate and are met by a servant who tells you, without looking at you directly, that you're expected in the back. Nobility and wealthy landowners don't mix with the help unless they absolutely must. That's just how it works. You may not even see the lady of the manor today. If you do, you're supposed to bow low, not make eye contact, and pretend that you have no opinions. Your first task is to carry firewood from the storage shed to the main hall. This sounds simple until you realize each piece of wood is heavier than the last, the pile is enormous, and the main hall is up several crooked stairs. You trudge on. Inside the great hall, the air is warmer, heavy with the scent of animal fat, beeswax, and the lingering smoke of countless feasts. Tapestries hang from the walls, thick and colorful, meant to block drafts as much as to show off wealth. One depicts a hunting scene. Another, a saint surrounded by confused-looking lions. You're not sure that's historically accurate, but hey, they didn't have Google. There's a long table where the family eats. The Lord has a chair with arms. Everyone else does not. That's one of the many subtle ways hierarchy shows up in everyday life. Another example, the food. What the Lord and his guests eat is entirely different from what's served to servants or day laborers like you. You're offered a heel of dark bread and a bowl of something pretending to be stew. You eat it standing up near the kitchen door, next to a boy chasing a rat with a broom. Medieval kitchens are surprisingly advanced if you're in a wealthy household. There are spits for roasting, iron cauldrons, and even primitive ovens. The cooks are skilled. They have to be because they're working with unpredictable ingredients and no refrigeration. Everything's either dried, salted, smoked, or alive. You notice a string of eels hanging near the hearth again. They seem to follow you. One of the kitchen hands drops a ladle into a pot and swears under her breath, then mutters something about her husband claiming he saw a fairy in the barley last night. This sparks a round of laughter. You chuckle too, because it's better than thinking about how many more logs you need to carry. Fairy beliefs are no joke here. Many people genuinely believe the world is full of unseen spirits, helpful, mischievous, or dangerous. There are charms hung by doorways, herbs tied with string, and whispered stories of travelers who vanished after mocking a stone circle. Historians still debate how seriously these beliefs influenced daily decision-making, but based on the amulet the cook wears on a cord around her neck, you'd guess quite a lot. Your next job is mucking out a storage area. You can't tell what was stored there, grain, fish, someone's dreams, but it smells like betrayal. You grip a shovel and begin the slow work of clearing it out, trying to breathe only through your mouth. Someone walks past and says, "Careful, last boy who cleaned that fell sick for a week." You laugh like they're joking. They're not. By the time you're finished, your hands are blistered, your shoulders ache, and you've acquired a mysterious stain on your tunic that you choose not to investigate further. You wash at the trough outside, where the water is frigid and moves like it has opinions about you. A goose hisses at you for no reason. Back inside, the steward hands you a halfpenny and tells you to come again tomorrow if your back hasn't broken. This is considered generous. You pocket the coin, which is not enough to buy much, maybe a lump of cheese, a candle, or 3 eggs on a lucky day. Still, it's something. Many people go weeks without coin, relying instead on barter or sheer force of will. The sun begins to drop, and the manor's halls grow darker. Candles and rushlights are expensive, so people follow the sun. No artificial light means your day ends when the sky dims, unless you're wealthy enough to burn wax like it grows on trees. As you leave the estate, you see the Lord's sons practicing swordplay on the lawn. Their swords are blunt, their armor ill-fitting, and their attitudes deeply annoying. They shout terms like parry and riposte, clearly thrilled to be pretending they're in a romance tale. You suppress an eye roll. You've seen more real violence over stolen chicken than these lads will likely ever face. Still, you admit it's a little fun to watch them tumble. One trips on his own foot and lands in a goose pat. Justice. The walk back into town is quiet. Evening smoke curls from chimneys. The fields turn golden in the fading light, and someone is playing a flute very badly near the tavern. You pass the same woman from earlier, still sweeping her doorstep. She nods. You nod back. This is your version of social media. As you turn the last corner toward your own door, you hear a child crying, someone yelling about a broken fence, and the unmistakable sound of someone vomiting too close to a pig pen. It's bedtime soon for most. But for now, the village breathes its slow, familiar rhythm. You, however, are thinking about your aching arms, and whether tomorrow's job might involve fewer eels. You duck through the crooked wooden door of your cottage, head automatically tilting to avoid the low beam that's nearly knocked you senseless on more than one occasion. Inside, the space is dim, with only the faintest shafts of dusty orange light creeping in through the slats. You exhale, letting your shoulders finally droop. For a moment, there's peace. Your home, if we're being generous, is a one-room hut with a thatched roof that leaks in at least 3 known spots, a dirt floor that always seems slightly damp, and a bed made from straw bundled in old cloth. The mattress crunches when you lie down. You do not ask why. A small hearth sits off-center, its coals barely alive. You nudge them with a stick until one grudgingly glows. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof and the faint hope that smoke remembers where to go. On windy nights, it doesn't. You open your food stash, which is really just a cloth bundle tucked into a hole near the wall. Inside, a turnip, a stale heel of bread, and a lump of cheese whose origins you question more with each passing day. Tonight's feast. You carve off a bit of the cheese with your belt knife, because no one has kitchen cutlery, and bite into it. It tastes like regret and slightly sour grass. The turnip, however, is surprisingly juicy. A win. You light a rushlight, dried reeds dipped in animal fat, and wedge it into a cracked holder on the wall. It smells faintly of mutton and sadness, but it does the job. Sort of. The room now resembles the lighting quality of a poorly designed haunted house. Medieval nights were long. Really long. Without electric lights or screens, you're at the mercy of the sun, and in winter, that means darkness falling as early as 4 p.m. People often divided their sleep into 2 chunks, first sleep and second sleep, with a quiet, wakeful period in between. You might pray, think, chat with a bedmate, if you have one, or, more likely in your case, stare at the ceiling beams and wonder if one will fall on your face. As you settle onto your straw mat, wrapping your cloak around you for warmth, you hear the village outside begin to quiet. Except for one baby. That baby never sleeps. You've never seen it, but you know its cry better than your own name. The family must be immune by now. From a few houses down, a low murmur of voices floats through the night air. Someone's telling a story. You can just make out the cadence. Something about a knight who got turned into a goat. Classic. Storytelling is the main entertainment here. No Netflix. No books, unless you're among the lucky few who can read. Instead, you get oral tales, riddles, songs, and the occasional puppet show performed by a traveling troupe who may or may not also rob you blind. It's low budget, high drama, and everyone participates. Even the old woman with one eye and a suspicious number of cats gets her turn. Tonight, though, you're content to let the stories pass by you like fog. You lie still, arms folded over your chest like a knight in a tomb, and let your mind wander. You remember a superstition you heard once. If your ears ring at night, someone's speaking ill of you. Yours are ringing, but it's probably just earwax. Or ghosts. Who can say? Outside, a dog barks, then abruptly stops, possibly because it's realized no one is feeding it. Despite the discomfort and the strange noises, sleep begins to creep in. Your body is exhausted. Medieval life is demanding, physically punishing, and filled with more crouching than anyone warns you about. Historians still argue whether the average peasant was truly miserable. Some argue people had strong community ties, knew their role, and took joy in simple things. Others say, sure, but also fleas. Speaking of which, you scratch at your arm. It's not polite to talk about, but most cottages, especially shared ones, have bed bugs, lice, or worse. You keep meaning to boil your tunic, but the last time you tried, it shrank to toddler size. You pull the cloak tighter. The wind picks up, whistling through the gaps in your roof. A draft tickles your toes. Somewhere in the loft above you, a mouse scratches and knocks something over. You mutter a half-hearted threat in its direction, but the mouse knows you're all talk. Lying here, surrounded by the smell of smoke, cheese, and faint mildew, you realize how much you miss silence. Not just quiet, but silence. The kind you get on mountaintops. In this village, something is always making noise. Geese, gossip, ghosts, or gassy livestock. The rushlight guttered out 10 minutes ago. You don't bother relighting it. Instead, you listen. A snore from the house next door. So enthusiastic it borders on musical. A door creaks on its hinges, then slams. Someone coughs. A man shouts something unintelligible in the street, followed by laughter, then nothing. Then at last, stillness. You close your eyes, wrapping yourself in the last warmth the straw can offer, and let your thoughts wander. You think about that traveling bard who came through last summer and told a tale of a land where apples grew year-round and people bathe indoors. You think of the steward's fancy boots and whether he'd notice if you borrowed them. You think about maybe trying to get into the monastery next spring. They have bread and literacy. Then your last thought before sleep finally drags you under. Did you remember to put the turnip back in the hole? You wake up before the sun. Not because you're an overachiever, but because the rooster has decided, once again, that the concept of sunrise is just a vague suggestion. He crows loudly, somewhere far too close to your window, and you groan into the straw. You roll over. Bad idea. Your entire body protests with the elegance of a collapsing ladder. Every muscle is stiff. Your neck is kinked. Your back has opinions. You feel like a half-baked bread loaf that someone forgot to knead properly. Still, you're up. There's no snooze button in the 1300s. Just your body's realization that if you don't get started soon, someone else will take your job, your place in the bread line, and maybe even your best turnip. You stretch, sort of. The ceiling is too low for full-arm glory, so your morning stretch is more of a cramped shrug and a satisfying ankle pop. You wipe your face with the same cloth you use for everything, drying, dusting, maybe patching that hole in your roof later. Time to get dressed. This takes all of 15 seconds because you sleep in your clothes. You do this not out of laziness, but necessity. Laundry is a process that involves a cauldron, lye, river water, scrubbing boards, and 2 hours of hoping you don't fall in. So yes, you're re-wearing yesterday's outfit, and probably tomorrow's. You open the door. The world is misty and damp, the village just beginning to stir. Smoke rises from thatched roofs. Someone is already sweeping. Again, do they sleep? Are they enchanted? You nod in their direction. They nod back mid-sweep. The rhythm of the place is comforting in its monotony. Today's job is with the cooper. Barrel making. You've never done this before, but that's not a problem. No one expects you to be good at anything. You just need to be willing, vaguely coordinated, and able to carry things that are heavier than they look. You meet the cooper, a grizzled man who smells permanently of sawdust and vinegar. He grunts a hello and hands you a stave. Barrel making is an art. The staves, the curved planks that form the body, must be precisely cut and angled. Too loose, and your barrel leaks. Too tight, and it cracks. There's no glue, no screws. Just wood, skill, and iron hoops. You admire the craftsmanship while pretending you understand anything that's happening. Your job is riveting, holding the staves in place while the cooper mutters and hammers, occasionally nodding at you like you're part of some sacred rite. He tells you that barrels are used for everything: ale, salted meat, fish, even transporting nails. One coopering mistake, and you could ruin a merchant shipment or spoil an entire winter's food supply. No pressure. He pauses to show you an older barrel, half busted, filled with water to test for leaks. As he tips it, you catch a whiff that strongly suggests it used to contain pickled herring. The smell smacks you like an ex-boyfriend's apology, unexpected and unpleasant. You blink it off and keep working. Barrel making is harder than it looks. The tools are sharp, the wood resists you, and your hands quickly gain new blisters to complement yesterday's collection. Still, it's honest work, kind of meditative in a splintery, sweat-drenched way. Around midday, you take a break. You sit on a stump outside the workshop, sharing a piece of dark bread and some dried apple slices with the cooper. He tells you about his son, who went to the city to become a scribe. Soft hands, that one, he mutters, though you catch the flicker of pride in his eyes. You ask what city life is like. He shrugs. No cows. Too many bells. Cities are growing in your time. London, Paris, Bruges. But they're still dangerous, filthy, crowded, and prone to catching fire. Yet they offer possibilities, apprenticeships, guilds, even theater. You wonder if you'll ever get there. Maybe after you master barrels. Maybe after you can go a day without smelling like fermented pine sap. You get back to work. This afternoon, you help steam a set of staves over the fire to make them pliable. The heat is intense. Your face turns tomato red within minutes. The Cooper laughs. First time, you'll get used to sweating from your eyeballs. You already have. Historians still argue whether Coopers were considered elite among craftsmen or just respected tradesmen. What's clear is that they were vital. Every village, town, and monastery needed barrels. And they weren't cheap. A good barrel could cost a day's wage, or more. And a cooper who knew how to make waterproof casks was practically royalty, or at least local celebrity. In the corner of the workshop, you spot a smaller barrel labeled with strange markings. The cooper notices and nods toward it. For the apothecary, he says, filled with leeches. You blink. He chuckles. Don't ask. You spend the rest of the day fitting iron hoops over finished barrels. It's like trying to slide a bracelet over a stubborn wrist. Requires finesse and brute force. Your arms are jelly. Your tunic is soaked. You've inhaled more wood dust than is probably advisable for any respiratory system, ancient or modern. When the sun starts to lower, the cooper claps you on the back and offers you a pint of ale from one of the less leaky barrels. It's warm, slightly sour, and tastes like bread that got into a fight with a plum. Still, it's the best thing you've had all week. You thank him and head home, barrel smelling and satisfied. Your hands are rougher, your shoulders ache, and you now instinctively flinch when you hear a hammer. But you did something real today. Something solid. Something round and vaguely drink-related. As you reach your door, the evening mist curls low around your ankles. You hear that same flute from a few nights ago. Still out of tune, still charming. The baby's blessedly silent. For now, you crawl into your straw bed and wince as your shoulder reminds you of that one awkward stave that refused to cooperate. You close your eyes and picture the perfect barrel, smooth, gleaming, sealed tight. You imagine floating down a calm river in one. It's peaceful, drifting. Then you realize you forgot to ask about tomorrow's job. Please let it involve less heat and fewer leeches. You wake up to the unmistakable sound of someone yelling your name, which is a bit alarming because you didn't think anyone knew your name. Turns out the steward does, and he's standing outside your door with that look, half annoyed, half amused, that says you've been volunteered for something. You throw on your cloak and step out. The sky is still that steely early morning gray. Your breath fogs in front of your face, and the grass beneath your feet squishes unpleasantly. The steward waves you over. You're helping with the reeve today, he says, then walks off without further explanation. Classic medieval HR. The reeve, as you soon learn, is the guy who makes sure all the villagers do their work and pay their dues. Kind of like a local manager crossed with your least favorite uncle. He used to be one of the villagers, but now he has authority, a big keyring, and a quill behind one ear. He grunts a greeting as you approach and hand you a ledger. We're doing the rounds, he says. You're not entirely sure what that means, but within 5 minutes, you're trudging behind him through fields, barns, and gardens, peering into people's pig pens and grain sacks. It's like tax season meets neighborhood watch. You stop at the mill first, where the miller is already at work, covered in flour and looking suspiciously guilty. The reeve asks about grain yields. The miller mutters something about rats. You glance at the ledger. There's a doodle in the margin of what looks like a dancing sheep. You decide not to ask. Next, you're off to the beekeeper's cottage. Yes, the village has a beekeeper. Her name is Maud, and she speaks to the bees like they're her grandchildren. She offers you a chunk of honeycomb wrapped in wax cloth. It's the best thing you've ever tasted. You almost cry. The reeve reminds you this isn't a picnic. You nod, brushing crumbs from your chin. From there, it's on to the cowherd, who's dealing with an escapee. You spend the next 20 minutes chasing a cow through 3 gardens and someone's laundry line. The cow wins. This is the part of medieval life you didn't expect. The sheer amount of middle management. Someone's always checking on someone else. Rents are tracked. Grain is counted. Duties rotate. It's not chaos. It's a bureaucracy built on mud, muscle, and mutual suspicion. Historians still debate whether reeves were respected or loathed. Some accounts paint them as vital enforcers of fairness, others as petty tyrants with a quill. Today's Reeve seems like a man who once lost an argument with a goose and has never quite recovered. Around midday, you arrive at the tanner's yard. You instantly regret everything. The smell hits you like a wall. Tanning involves soaking animal hides in lime, urine, and yes, dung. It's an olfactory experience that can only be described as profound. The tanner waves from behind a vat, elbow deep in something you choose not to identify. Don't breathe through your nose, the Reeve says casually, already marking things in the ledger. You nod, then nearly gag. You learn that tanners often lived apart from the village, downwind when possible, for obvious reasons. Their work was vital. Leather was used for shoes, belts, bags, even parchment, but the stench stuck to everything, including your soul. After a quick inventory, the Reeve hands you a pair of gloves. Your turn, he says. You stare at him. Just for the afternoon, he adds. We need someone to help with the lime pits. You can't tell if this is punishment or training. Either way, it's happening. You spend the next few hours assisting the tanner. Your job: turn the hides, make sure they don't dry unevenly, and try not to fall in. The tanner gives you a pep talk. If you do fall in, stay calm and scream upward. Comforting. By the end of the shift, your arms are sore, your boots are ruined, and you smell like a goat's bad decision. But you've learned a lot. For instance, urine is actually useful when properly aged. And no matter how desperate things get, never ask what brain tanning involves. You don't want to know. The tanner gives you a scrap of leather as a thank you. Good for patching shoes, he says. You nod solemnly, vowing to burn your own footwear at the earliest opportunity. On the way back, the Reeve surprises you by offering a bit of advice. You work hard, he says. Not always smart, but hard. That'll count for something. It's the closest thing to praise you've received in weeks. You bask in it. The village is winding down as you return. Children run past, chasing a dog with 3 legs and a remarkable sense of self-confidence. Someone's playing a flute again. Same tune, slightly better. The sun glows like melted copper over the fields. You wash up in the stream, scrubbing your arms until they're raw. The water is cold and fast, and it steals the worst of the tanner's perfume. You watch it swirl away downstream, heading towards some future century that hopefully smells better. Dinner tonight is barley porridge, spiced with a hint of leftover honey. You eat slowly, grateful for anything that doesn't come from a vat. Your muscles ache. Your brain hums. You lie back on your straw, staring at the darkened rafters. You wonder if you could become a tanner's apprentice. There's a sort of brutal poetry to it. Then you remember the smell. Hard pass. You fall asleep faster than usual, dreaming of bees, barrels, and a cow that cannot be caught. The final day in the village unfolds with a gentle focus on festivals. Those rare, bright moments that broke the rhythm of work and worry with music, dance, and shared joy. You awake to the distant sound of a flute, the village square alive with preparations for a seasonal celebration. Colorful ribbons flutter in the breeze, and the scent of spiced mead mingles with freshly baked bread. Villagers, dressed in their finest, often hand-stitched and patched, gather to honor traditions both ancient and evolving. You join a circle where elders recount stories of harvest gods and local heroes, their voices weaving myth and memory in a hypnotic cadence. You learn about the May Day Festival, a lively occasion with dancing around the maypole, singing, and playful contests. The air is filled with laughter, the kind that seeps into your bones and carries you away from everyday troubles. Historians still debate how pagan and Christian customs blended in such celebrations, making it tricky to separate the old beliefs from newer rites. This mix, however, made festivals rich and layered, a tapestry of meaning. As the sun sets, a communal feast unfolds, where everyone shares dishes prepared from the week's harvest. You savor flavors you recognize from earlier days: herbs, bread, cheese, with the addition of honey-sweetened treats and roasted nuts. You notice children weaving flower crowns, their innocence a bright thread in the fabric of village life. Music swells, and some villagers break into spontaneous dance, their feet stirring dust and joy alike. As night deepens, you find a quiet spot outside the village, gazing at the stars that have guided generations. The sounds of celebration drift softly, a lullaby for the tired and the hopeful. You feel a profound connection to this slow, deliberate world, one filled with small wonders and the resilience of ordinary people. You settle down beneath the sky's vast blanket, the night whispering promises of rest and renewal.